Hey guys, my name is Brandon and this is a Gryphon. 3D printed flywheel blaster that's been popping up all over the place recently. So today I'm going to give a brief overview of what the Gryphon is and the 7 things I think you need to know about it. The Gryphon was actually released over a year ago by a designer going under the alias Flygonial, and at the time it was well received, but you barely ever saw them. However, recently I've been seeing them popping up all over Reddit and Facebook and Discord and every other place where people post pictures of their Gryphons. So a lot of people have been wondering, why a Gryphon? What makes it so special? And I think what makes the Gryphon so special is that there's nothing special about it. It's self-labeled as a no-frills kind of workhorse blaster. Essentially, if you have your flywheels and your motors, you can just slap them right into a Gryphon the same way that you would into a regular Strife build. Now, the first thing that I think you should know about the Gryphon is that it actually uses proprietary cages. The motors are actually mounted directly into this front assembly. This is the cage. It does not contain a cage, and therefore you cannot use any of your usual open flywheel project or Strifeoid type cages that you're used to using. With that said, the proprietary cage does come in the standard 43.5mm stock crush all the way down to the 40mm crush for daybreaks, and there's even a 38.5mm version for the clip setups. Additionally, all of those cages come with dual stage variants. So although you can't use the cages that you're used to using, you're still ultimately going to get about the same performance because the cages will still be coming in the crush setups that you're used to using. Additionally, this motor housing down here is fairly spacious and you're able to fit your 130s all the way up to 180 motors. I was also able to fit the Out of Darts motor span board in there with plenty of room to breathe around it. Now, the second thing that I think you should know about the Gryphon is that although pretty much every time you see one, it's running half-lengths, the Gryphon actually comes with 3 magwells. There's the standard full-length magwell and then 2 half-length magwells for katana or talon variants, depending on what you're running. And those half-length magwells will also fit all of the various 3D printed magazines that fit into those ecosystems. However, the third thing that I think you should know about the Gryphon is a warning. If you run these 3D printed magazines that use the standard foam blast drum spring, you might have some issues. Now, the Gryphon uses a geared pusher system where pulling the trigger rotates a pinion gear that slides a very large, oversized pusher directly into the magwell along the feed guide. And normally, that results in a very reliable system. However, the return mechanism for that pusher is a compression spring on the trigger. And these foam blast drum springs have a lot of vertical force. So what was happening in my case is that the pusher would push a dart, and then this would happen, and the darts would actually squeeze the pusher up against the magwell and prevent it from returning. I would have to wiggle the magazine or partially eject it for there to be enough room for the pusher to actually retract and then be able to fire my next dart. Now, I ended up lubricating everything and bringing my pusher up to about 1,000 grit, and in doing so, I was getting my failure rate down to like 1 in 3 darts. However, 33% failure rate for a semi-automatic blaster is pretty high. So ultimately what I ended up doing was putting a second compression spring in my trigger. So my trigger pull's not quite as smooth as yours might be, although now it has enough force to kind of overcome the vertical force in that magazine. I would like to note, however, that with the regular Talon magazines, I didn't experience any problems at all. It was only with the various 3D printed magazines that I use. Now, the fourth thing that I want to talk about is the fact that there are actually a few cosmetic variants out there. There's the Gryphon S, which has an M4-like appearance and actually uses one of the PW worker stocks. There's Adrian's Cosmetic Remix, which I am running. And there's a really cool remix by Meeker called the Appinicus. And the Appinicus has a full-length magwell, although I believe he recently prototyped a half-length version, that is completely open on the top. So you can actually top load your darts directly into the magazine without having to eject that magazine. It also moves the battery from the stock up to where it would be like on a Strife, so if you want a more pistol-sized build, it does that as well. Now, when people design cosmetic kits for the Hasbro blasters, they're kind of working around that Hasbro geometry in covering pieces up and fitting into other bits. And, you know, a lot of them do a great job at transforming the way that it looks, but ultimately, a lot of the times it looks like a Strife with a kit or a Retaliator with a kit. And I think what's really cool about the Gryphon is that because it's so thin and minimal, it's a lot easier to kind of design kits that bolt on top of this. It can just sort of be the drivetrain that we build blasters around. And I think as the popularity grows, we're going to start seeing a lot more aesthetic kits and remixes for this blaster, which I'm excited to see. And speaking of growing in popularity, the fifth thing that I think you should know about the Gryphon is that you can't buy one. Now, Flywheel actually released the Gryphon under a license that lets anybody make and sell Gryphons. You don't even have to give him a cut, although if you make them, you should. Now, there are some people who are building them on commission, such as myself, so if you would like a Gryphon, let me know below. But the only other way that you can get one is to build it yourself. Luckily, the Gryphon is actually a very easy print. There's not a lot of complex geometry, there's very minimal supports needed, and pretty much all of the parts have very short print times. I think the magwell is probably the worst piece of all of it, and even that's only a couple hours. Additionally, you only need a 120mm bed, so that combined with the short print times means that you can probably build this on a shared printer in a library or school, assuming your library or school is open. All around, it's a very easy entry-level build. And on that note, the sixth thing that I want to tell you about the Gryphon is just what you need to actually put one together. Now, it's a flywheel blaster, so you need your usual motors, flywheels, wire, and a single micro switch. You also need a single compression spring for the trigger, and the pinion gear for the pusher mechanism needs a pin or dowel to actually keep it in place. I've heard that some people have actually used a piece of filament for that, but I think that it'll eventually bend and probably cause some misfeeds. Unlike a lot of other 3D printed blasters that use the M2.5 or M2.6 sort of Nerf sized screws, this actually uses M3 screws, which are a little larger but still very easy to find. However, you need a lot of them. Now, I didn't actually count how many are in my blaster before I started filming this, however, I'll have it up on the screen somewhere. But I ended up having to go to the hardware store like 2 or 3 times because I kept thinking that I had enough screws and just didn't. Now, the last thing that I think you should know about the Gryphon is not necessarily a feature of the blaster, but just that I really like it. I would much rather build one of these than go out and buy a $20 or $30 blaster just to gut everything inside it so that I can put the exact same internals I would have put in here into that. And I think that going forward, if I need a flywheel blaster for a specific purpose, it's going to be a Gryphon. In fact, I am printing one over there right now. I just think it's really cool and modular, and I really hope that more people get their hands on them and that they start becoming more popular because I really like it. So with all that said, if you have any questions about the Gryphon or about my Gryphon specifically, leave a comment below. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like, and if you want more foam related content in the future, feel free to subscribe. And I will have links to all of the files for the Gryphon as well as the variants that I mentioned in the description box below. Thank you for watching.